Podcast. It's time. Your host, Stu Palmer.
We delve into the world of MMA, and my guest today is former UFC MMA fighter. It is Joe Daddy Stevenson on the show today for episode 141 of Stu's Wrestling Podcast, all the way from California. Joe, I want to talk about your career, but first and foremost, I want to talk about free MMA, a special gym for kids who are underprivileged, people on low incomes, and even seniors who can come and train for free at Free MMA with your good pal, Jared. So yeah, let us know what it's all about.
Yeah, I'm very excited. I'm helping out my buddy Jared. He turned me on to this this great concept of helping people. I think some of the people that need it the most. You know, people that come from troubled backgrounds, people that have seen abuse, and I mean, not very many of these groups specialize on certain things, but this particular group specializes on abused boys, you know, not just all children, but they have some focus on people that have been hurt real bad, and they try to use mixed martial arts and martial arts themselves to change their life and help put them in the right direction. It's an amazing thing they're doing.
Joe, that's incredible. Just so nice to hear. Yeah, what else has been happening with it this year, and you know what's been going on?
Yeah, I know it's been a crazy 2023. I've had definitely some nuts stuff happen, such as like 4 people passing in this last 25 days. It's made me realize like how much it's important to tell the people you love around you that you love them. So that's it. If you haven't done that today, you should.
It's nice to hear you helping them. You know, these people have got problems, so yeah, just you can draw off your personal experiences as well. But yeah, just what great help you guys are giving these people, and it's amazing. It's just so nice to hear, so refreshing to hear.
Yeah, and there's very few outlets. You know, when bad things happen, there's a lot of things you could do to distract yourself, but the ones you choose, you have to be very careful, because you know, if you're going to use like alcohol or drugs or something to mask it, it doesn't hide it. It's still there, and you have to go and address it at some time. Even distractions like, man, I'm just going to train really hard. Well, after you're done training really hard, it's still going to be there. So you better prepare yourself to deal with these things.
I'd love to know how many people you've got in the gym, you know, how many people are training, the people that you're helping out. That'd be great to hear.
Well, so the last practice that I saw, there was 11 different people, like 15 different students. But when I say students, some were kids, and some had transitioned as kids, as like young adults. It was beautiful to see, and to see how hard they're working, and to see them going in the right direction. I mean, there's a lot more students than that, I'm sure, but the particular class I got to see on a Friday night at 7 p.m., which is, as a coach, your 7 p.m. class on a Friday, you tend not to have 15 people in it, because Fridays everyone's out doing something, partying. I think that really caught my attention when I went to the practice, and I noticed I like to have my fighters train at 7 p.m. and I'll have, you know, sometimes a packed class, but a lot of times there's like 4 or 6 guys that are dedicated. To see a class packed like that on a Friday night, and to know that it was involving people that needed the class just as much as the class needed them, it's really beautiful.
This could be rolled out in the UK. It'd be amazing to see someone follow this, give people an incentive to come and train, a safe place to train. So yeah, they could really take some tips and advice from this, what you're doing over there in California and in the USA.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much more to look into it. I'm sure, honestly, the gyms can look into grants to allow that too, to help the troubled youth. There's a lot of programs out there that can just help steer you in the right direction. Sometimes like starting a recycling program and saying, hey guys, you can bring your recycling in it. This is all going to go towards people that need it. Little things, anything in the right direction.
How have things been going for you, Joe? What have you been doing away from free MMA for a moment? What's been happening? Where have you been training? I know you're so active on the MMA circuit, helping guys.
Really, really, really good. I teach at Dan Henderson's in Temecula, and I teach at Cobra Kai in Victorville. So 2 days of the week I'm in Temecula, drive an hour and a half there, an hour and a half back. And then the other rest of the week I'm in Victorville coaching. Doing that allows my guys to cross train. There's like 4 other gyms that a lot of times the hard thing is, in MMA, everyone's like, oh, I got this secret move. I don't want anyone to see it. I don't want them. Cross training is not really pushed too much at gyms and stuff. Like, it's not nice to see all these guys being able to train with a bunch of people and try to just become better. The program, the jiu-jitsu program is doing wonderful. The MMA program is doing wonderful. Boxing, kickboxing, it's all awesome. We focus on youth, so that's always been. I've noticed, like, adults, they'll break your heart, but kids, like, it's always the right reason. They'll go out there. Not only will they cry, and smile so big when they win or lose, but they're most of these kids, amateurs too, they're paying for the experience. They're legitimately paying for these competitions. Even the ones that are fighting amateur, you have to pay for your medicals. And to see them love it to the extent that they do, something that's so difficult, it makes me happy, because fighting really prepares you for life. Life's not fair. Bad things happen, even when you're doing everything right. But in fighting or in wrestling, if you lose your match at the tournament, you can't dwell on it, because you got to move on for the next match and be prepared. And that's kind of how what life is all about. Bad stuff's going to happen. What do you do about it?
What do you think of MMA currently, the UFC? A lot has changed since you were in there so many years ago. So yeah, what are your thoughts on UFC and MMA currently and where it's at?
I was at Prince Albert's Hall for UFC 33 and a third. To watch it blow up the way it has is beautiful. But we kind of all said it in the beginning. All of those guys were like, yeah, this is going to be the biggest sport in the world. And we've watched it become definitely the fastest growing sport and competing with all the other sports. And it's something that, with that, you're going to have development. The coaches like myself and other coaches now, they've got to learn from their own past experiences when we would spar 5 times a week to now like sparring 2 or 3 times a week, or even using some type of live drill scenario to get the same result of spiked heart rate with less trauma to the brain. Being able to teach the guys the don'ts. Hey, don't go out there and do this. Like, find yourself, find your rhythm, find out what type of fighter you are, but definitely don't go do this stuff. That tends to be the best way to approach it.
Yeah, look at the differences now, and look at John McCain and what he was doing to outlaw it in the early days. They were waiting for it to be passed in different states. So to see where it is now to where it was then, what are your thoughts on that?
John McCain is not a person that a lot of people, like, I feel there was a time a lot of people trusted him and where he was going. I don't think, I'm not a big supporter of him. I think people that say stuff like that have alternative motives. So, and for sure that person does and still does. So that's just my personal opinion.
It's guys and people within politicians who know nothing about combat sports, though, isn't it? And that was the problem, wasn't it, in the early days? And as you say, it's all other codes of fighting. But yeah, they don't know, they don't understand. Even, I bet there's people today that don't understand. But yeah, even back then in the early days, they're not fans of the sport. They looked at it as human cockfighting.
Well, I mean, on another level, there's so many other factors that you have to calculate. You know, there's the idea that there could have been boxing that was causing, like, maybe they were trying to prevent MMA from becoming big. There's so many things, and then maybe MMA is trying to stop boxing stuff from coming over, like the Muhammad Ali, and we're just sitting here watching it, trying to say, well, who's the bad guys? Instead of focusing on what's important, like what can we do? What can we do to guarantee that, you know, like negative things don't happen to our children or to our fighters or to our youth?
Obviously, you're really, really busy, Joe, but do you get a chance to watch any fights? Are you watching the recent stuff, or is it just a case of time constraints and not being able to?
I only like watching fights when I got a friend fighting, you know, Clay, Cub, Juan, like that's fun to me. I teach about 8 hours to 10 hours a day of actually jiu-jitsu, combat, and MMA. Like, I just drove down to Dan's. I'm pulling up to the parking lot, and I'm going to teach from 8 to 12, take a break for 3 hours and 45 minutes, and teach again until like 7 to 8 o'clock. Then I'll drive home. This is what I do. Like, when you see 300 and he's like, Sparta, like, what is your profession? This is what I do. I do 10,000 hours. If you were to do this sport 5 hours a day, or no, 5 hours a week, that's like 1 hour a day, it would take you something like 39, 38 years to reach 10,000 hours. I reached 10,000 hours without counting weekends, just weekdays, every 4.8 years of this sport. So I love what I do. I'm the U.S. coaching director for the United States, so I get to help like upcoming talent, and I get to like tell them my stories about like what may work, may not work. I get to go to Serbia, I believe, in 2 weeks and help the U.S. team at the IMAF World Championships. So very excited. I just honestly love everything I get to do, and I get to involve my children in it. They're wrestling. One of them is a national champ already in MMA, and just some really remarkable, amazing things.
I bet that's the ultimate. I bet it eclipses anything you did in your career, your son wrestling and the way you look at it. So I bet it's amazing. That's full circle for you. But yeah, as I say, your son being involved in it, in wrestling, you getting to see him, I think it's just, I can only imagine how it feels for you as a father.
Oh, I cried, yeah. Yeah, I cried. I told him, I love you, son, and I held him, and he didn't get it. He looked at me, and he was like, why are you crying, Dad? And I said, because I fought for the belt. I won the Ultimate Fighter. I'm the coach. One of the coaches for the U.S. team. I'm doing all this, and none of it mattered, because I have 4 sons, and a lot of people in this sport would just hold me accountable to what my children have done. And for you to do this, and while he's wrestling, while he's going to school, while he's looking at college, like all of these things happening in his life, to still be able to be able to win it and have the opportunity, I just gave him the biggest hug and told him I love him so much and thank you for everything.
That's so nice to hear, Joe. It's just so nice to hear you're able to do that with your son.
Do you train?
Oh, I couldn't train, Joe. Oh my days. 2 left feet. Bambi would be better than me at doing that. There's just no way I could do it. I love watching it that way, fan perspective, but I couldn't fight. Just my coordination and things like that.
That's not true. I got a 64-year-old guy named Easy who started training with me when he was 62. He's already competed in a tournament, had 2 different brackets, competed in like never wrestled in his whole life. You can do it, but it's difficult. I get it. I think anything that something like if you're to have this podcast, to be able, you clearly care. And that being said, you probably can't do anything half-let. Like I'm a lot like that.
I'm very, very unsteady on my feet. So yeah, it's just as I alluded to just a second ago, I'm like Bambi, man. I'm like Bambi. I don't think I'd be very good, especially with stand-up.
Well, I won a few fights not even throwing one punch. So like necessarily you don't have to have the best footwork, but it's very important. I know a lot of really good boxers and MMA fighters take dancing lessons just for their footwork.
It'd be like me with my son as well. I think, he's young, he's only 6.5 months old, but it'll be when he's doing things, I can't wait to live stuff through him. And I hope he's good at sport. I hope he doesn't take after me and he's good at sports.
Oh yeah, that's going to make you better.
I can't wait for that. I cannot wait to see him and live it through him, as I just said before. It's amazing. So yeah, that's kudos to you as well. A father to 4 boys. It's just amazing to hear about you living through your sons as well. So cool.
To love somebody more than yourself. So what I've always told my friends when they're having a baby is like, you're about to experience a new level of love that you've never experienced. You're about to have love for something on this earth that more than yourself, and it's beautiful. And when that baby is born, it's so close to God just because it's just starting out just like that. And it's, our responsibility to protect them and to help bring them into a position to where they can, protect themselves eventually as they become adults and guide them. Just like we do coaching, we have to guide our children. No one wants a coach that's telling them to do one thing and doing the other thing. If no one wants a parent that's telling them one thing and doing another thing, you got to preach. You got to live what you preach.
Back to your career, Joe. Way back when, obviously, I remember when you were a contestant on The Ultimate Fighter, way back when, I remember watching the series and just loving seeing you winning it. Just your experiences of that, being on The Ultimate Fighter, sowing your oats early on in your career. I'd love to hear about that.
I've been on two. The one where I got knocked out was probably my most proudest moment, because prior to that, they were talking about the lockdown and they were doing like no Muslims allowed to come into the U.S. and it was literally just happening through why we were in the Ultimate Fighter, and there were some Muslims that were on our team, and so we all decided. We said, I talked to him and I was like, after the fight, let's pray, and we were able to pray after the fight. So I felt blessed to be able to wake up from being unconscious and to still be able to remember my responsibility of prayer and to be that role model and being able to say it. That was better than winning it in season 2. And for my children to be able to see that.
I've got to ask you about facing BJ Penn, the man, the legend, obviously UFC Hall of Famer. You were still relatively young when you were fighting him. So, yeah, just getting to take on the legend, the man, the legend in MMA that was BJ Penn, man. How was that for you?
Well, I was really lucky when I fought BJ. My brother-in-law was a PJ at the time, and he got to work with some of the Queen's Airmen. So I remember I had a bunch of tickets. In my contract, because I was fighting in Vegas, I would get X amount of tickets. Well, not everyone flew out to England, so I was able to give some tickets to the Queen's Airmen, the Special Forces guys, and as a gift to me, they gave me one of their bottles of scotch, a single malt, beautiful, distilled with, they told me the story behind it. And I think it was like 20 or 30 years old. And I was looking at it, and it was such an honor. And this is what I haven't drank in 10 years, my friend, since October 16th. I was 30. I'm 40 now. And when it happened, this is how stupid I am. Like, it was a great time. We had a great fantasy football draft party, and I'm like, oh, let's open that bottle. I open the bottle, I give it to all my buddies. It was drank the way it was supposed to be enjoyed, but I'm sure it's something I could have cherished, held on, and given to my children. I'd
love to hear about your sobriety as well. I know you had your struggles over the years. you've overcome that. Yeah, just how was that been? You know, the genesis of that, and just life before that and stuff that maybe triggered it for you.
When my dad passed away, I was 17 years old. On that same time, my not only my dad, but my grandpa, who was like a POW in World War II and pretty much raised me, he passed away too because my dad was gone. And so it was very difficult. And I grew up in a house where you could drink at the house, you just couldn't drink outside the house, so it was acceptable. So I used alcohol to mask my pain. I cried when I found out my dad died, and I cried when I got his wallet and his ashes, and I hadn't really addressed it until I stopped drinking. 10 years ago, I found myself going through, after the first 30 days of sobriety, having to go through all the emotions that I suppressed, and it opened me up to where I feel okay to cry now. Like if something happens that's bad, I understand it's okay to cry. I understand that it's okay to release those emotions. And that really makes me feel a lot better. I've had 4 people that I love pass away in the last 25 days. And some of the coping mechanisms now, such as helping others have to be positive and remind them of the good times, has really helped me. Making slides and stuff for the memorials, things like that, has helped me deal with it. And it's, I guess, trying to think of the most positive way to go forward is very important.
Thank you for sharing that, man. Thank you so much for sharing that. That's a personal thing. So for you to share that, I know people obviously have issues with alcohol, drugs. It's going to help them massively hearing how you've coped and how you've managed with it.
Yeah, no problem. I realized, drinking, I'm a parent that's never been late to pick up my kids from school. Never not called them on a call time, never. And that was a big thing to me, was like, hey, am I doing my very best? Because I believe, to honor God is my mission, and to do my very best to honor him and to be a great father and all these things. And I realized I wasn't, and it wasn't allowing me to do my very best. So it was a quick fix. I get distracted. I'm sorry.
Oh, there's no need to be sorry, Joe. It's fine. On this show, we flip-flop from subject to subject, and then we go back to topics that we were speaking about. It's very free. We're very robust on this show, so don't worry about that. It's absolutely fine. We've obviously come away from BJ Penn now. I knew we were starting to talk about it. So, yeah, just getting in there with BJ, man.
Oh, well, here, let me give you the story from when the fight started. I was 18 years old. I flew to to Hawaii in Waikiki area to corner my friend Jason Lambert. He was fighting Cabbage. I felt like the fight, it was a back and forth fight. It was awesome. And then afterwards, we were all invited to go out. I went to the after party, even though I was 18, it was, when you were a fighter back then, it got you through the door a lot of places. And I remember being in the back and seeing BJ, and BJ was already in the UFC and stuff. And I was like, oh, what's up? And he's like, oh, I know who you are, Joe Daddy. He's like, or no, I know who you are, Joe Stevenson, because I was Wonder Boy back then. And he's like, we're going to fight one day, bro. And I was like, what? And at the time, I was like 170, cutting to 170 from 205. And I was like, no way. No way. We're different weight classes. I love you. Literally almost missed my flight. And then ending up, the UFC tells me, hey, if you want the title shot, you're going to have to fight BJ. And then just like, oh, crap. Just being surreal, like, okay, it's happening. I think it was, I remember BJ's like, he's such a good person, but he likes to get in the zone when he fights. So like, we were at this summit for the UFC, right? But it was like 3 months before we were going to fight. And he's like, this is the last time, Joe, we're going to shake hands because we're going to be fighting soon. And I was like, all right. And then I remember seeing it before the fight, and it's just hard for me not to give love to people. And I shook his hand, and I could tell he was like, dang it. Like, I didn't want to shake your hand, but okay. It was surreal. You're talking about somebody that was knocked unconscious at 17 by Jens Pulver, or I don't even know if I was knocked unconscious. I broke my orbital, never been in that much pain, in the city of Columbine, like a month after the shooting. And then after that, I'm still in high school. I'm a senior the next year. I'm running on the treadmill. I got a baby on the way. I'm just screaming, I'm going to be the best on the treadmill, always in my head. Then I have these children, and I can recall times where I'm pushing a red line. I'm running 1 minute sprints on full incline on 7.5 speed and walking 1 minute and going back and forth. And my heart rate feels like it's bearing out of my chest. And I'm doing everything not to grab onto the handles of the treadmill, and to do this, I'm screaming each foot. In each foot I would step, I would say, hey, every other step, Jens, Pulver. And I would say the same thing with BJ, because I was like, man, I gotta make this in my head. And I'll tell you what, it wasn't enough to keep me on the treadmill. I had to change it to, I love Joey. I love Tyler, my sons. And that is what was able to push me to that threshold. So by the time I had to fight BJ, I had felt like I had been preparing for it my whole life. And the only thing that sucked about that was I spent my whole life savings in Big Bear. I was only getting 20 and 20 at the time, and I had 20,000 saved because I was trying to be smart and wise. And I put it all into a camp where I had Gray Maynard, Mark Hominick, Chris Hordecki, Jeff Glover, Murillo Santana, Jake Rolschalt, Shane Roller, all there. I don't want to miss anyone. Chris Hordecki, I think, Sam Stout, Tyson Griffin, Gray Maynard, all rotating on me every minute to get me ready for that fight. And my idea was, I'm going to go the distance because I need to get him tired, and I got to bring him into the part where I've seen him be weak. And then the end of the first round happened, and I see the blood squirting out of my head. And I remember right before the fight started, at the weigh-ins, the day before the UFC, and came up to me and they're like, hey, you're not in the US. If this fight gets bloody, they're probably going to stop it. They told me that before the day before the fight. So that's in the back of my head. I just spent $20,000 on a camp expecting this fight to go the distance. The second round starts. I shake my head like I'm ready, and I see blood squirt 5 feet out of my head. I'm like, oh, I had to throw the game plan out of the way. I had to fight. Afterwards, the head doctor was like, yeah, we estimated like you had to have lost like 500 cc's of blood at least. And to have that just contemplate in my head, like, did I do the right thing? Doing the audible, chasing him, trying to change the fight completely because I was scared that I might pass out from lack of blood. All of those things are factors. And then to see the picture, one time this fan came up with a picture of me on my knees, bloody, crying, and then BJ over there. And they looked at me, and I was like, you sure you want me to sign this? You sure you don't want BJ to sign it? And they looked at me, and they're like, no, I want you to sign it. That was amazing. And I was like, okay. And I signed it, and I realized that to everyone, that exact moment meant something a little different. To me, it meant, aspirations and emotional, like, release of having to fight somebody I loved and cherished and honored. All of those things happening at once, and failure, and then, when you lose, you only get paid your show money. So I spent my savings on that fight, and then the UFC sent me $5,000, like, as a bonus. And I was like, oh man, that sucks. Like, I remember legitimately thinking, like, wow, I've heard all these things about bonuses, and being like, $5,000 when I spent 20, and I knew that the pay-per-view did really good, and I saw everyone that was there. That hurt. but losing the fight hurt way more than the financials. Oh yeah, I got my head around a bottle. That was horrible, right? That wasn't the right thing to do. I definitely, my cornerman ended up shooting arrows in the hallways of a townhome. We I found out that absinthe is legal in England. I found out all these crazy things, um, and that was the wrong way to address that. That was the wrong way. And my job now is to help educate the people coming up in the sport the wrong ways.
I want to go back to you as a trainer. You know, what tips can you give guys that want to get into MMA and how you're training people and stuff like that, man? It'd be great to hear just how you do the things you do in the gym and how you help these people at all levels, all skill levels of MMA.
Well, the thing of the matter is, like, every fighter is different. Every circumstance is different. Every fighter can't be coached the same. You can't yell at somebody the same way that as somebody needs encouragement. Sometimes people need, a little fruit hanging in front of them to dangle in front of them for them to get it, and figuring out that. So the number one thing I tell all fighters is they got to figure out what they're fighting for. So if you want to be the best in the world, it honestly starts with being the best in the room. And being the best in the room doesn't mean you need to find a new room. It means you need to figure out ways to increase the intensity and the level, like Shark Tanks, things like that. I hate it when people are like, oh, if you're in the best room, you got to go. No, if you're the best in the room, you got to figure out ways to challenge yourself. You got to figure out what you're fighting for. Are you fighting to be the best of all time? Are you fighting to sign boobs? Are you fighting to skip lines? What are you fighting for? Because when you tell me what you're fighting for, I can now use that to push you and to hold you accountable, and you can now focus. And that's when you're going to see a lot better training. It's like if you've ever been going through like any type of court for family, and the mediator sit you down and say, describe your life. Well, I described my life to the mediator, and I was like, I don't hang out with anyone that doesn't have kids because I want to be around my kids on my free time. I found out a lot about myself. I was like, wow. And then if you were to do that with what you do, like for fighting, I told you, I coach anywhere from 8 to 10 hours daily. Fridays only 5 hours, and then on the weekends sometimes it's all weekend. But I don't stress out. I had a gallbladder removed, and I was at the day after I was released. I was coaching at 6:30 a.m. because my kids needed to see what it takes to be the best. Everything. It takes everything. Like I hate hearing people like say what car. Like I tell people, good problems are not problems. Like when you got to figure out what car to drive to the mall or on your vacation, that's a good problem to have. You shouldn't bring it up. Certain things are good problems to have. You want to have a position where you're training where you have good problems. Oh man, I could go here, I could go there today. Oh man, I can go hard in the morning or hard at night. Those are good problems to have. If you find yourself saying that, like the fact that you can dictate your training like that, that's a great problem to have. So I guess staying positive, focus, understanding why they fight. Most of the people that try to sign up on my gym, I try to talk them out of fighting. If I can talk, and then, you know what? I've had a couple people come up to me after and say, I went and I trained here instead, and like trying to show me up. And I'm like, okay, buddy. The whole thing is like, if you came to me and asked me to fight and I can talk you out of it, you weren't going to be a fighter anyway. So some people have taken it rude when I try to talk them out of it and tried to prove me wrong. And that's great if that helped inspire them, but they don't get it. Like they're using rage to push them. Any of those people I've ever tried to push a direction away from fighting, I hope if they're listening to this, they understand the reason. God has everything happen for a reason. You know how it feels to hold somebody's head when they're unconscious? I do. You know, like, I know how it feels. And these guys, like, oh, are these parents that never fought pushing these kids? I just want to, sometimes they have no idea the fact that when I drive at night, shiny lights hurts my vision because I've been concussed before I was 18. You know, all these things. And they're going to put their kids in the middle of it without never taking it. And they're going to say the most, I've heard parents say the craziest stuff, or coaches say the craziest stuff when I knew the parent or the coach didn't have the same experience or level or have ever felt what that kid is feeling. That upsets me.
That's bad on the parents' part, though, isn't it? You know, the dangers of doing this, and, you know, guys who can do it, I tip my hat to them. You know, the stuff that happens to them, the aftercare people need it. It's not as straightforward as people think. And, you know, they're putting their kids at risk. Sometimes it takes a certain type of person to do this, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah. It's CT. Yeah. It's stuttering. It's stuttering when you see your buddies when you're 40. It's, you can't remember birthdays. You know, they don't care about that. I get scared in public because my dad was bipolar and schizophrenic. I've lived my whole life with my mom telling me never to control my emotions and not to let it take over me because it'd change me. And so I had to hear people whispering, "Oh, it's Joe over there," like, instead of like coming up and talking to me, or all of this stuff. And that stuff drives me crazy and is so scary. Too, I guess that was just me sharing some of my fears. There's so much that goes on to this fighting that the parents have no idea if they weren't in the sport. Oh, but you know what? I just noticed it's about to be practice time, so I gotta let you go, brother.
Oh, not a problem at all. I'm so mindful of your time and you sparing the time to come on Stu's Wrestling Podcast to talk to me today. But before you go, Joe, just can you plug Free MMA, the service that is available with your friend Jared, who is running it? And there is a GoFundMe as well. People can make donations, can't they?
Oh, wonderful. With the opportunities that you are going to create by pushing one of these children, let me just tell you. So let's say, imagine if you've ever wrestled somebody and you're like, why are they going so hard? It's just a match. It's just a takedown. It's just a submission, because it means more to that person than you, because maybe you weren't there in their life when they felt like the only admiration they could get was through victory, because, you know, maybe their parents were addicted to drugs or gone in jail or you know, or passed on, you know, all of these things. Like, you're about to, by helping Free MMA and helping these children, you're going to change somebody's life in the future. Like, you just started a domino effect. Like, if you can buy a $2 Powerball ticket, you could send $2 to them. That would be amazing. It'd probably be spent a lot better.
My guest today for episode 141 of Stu's Wrestling Podcast, UFC legend, MMA legend, training guys now, the future stars of pro MMA. Thank you so much. Joe Daddy Stevenson, UFC alumni. Thank you so much for coming on Stu's Wrestling Podcast today. Appreciate it, sir.
Thank you, Stu. God bless you. Have a great time.
The fantastic Joe Daddy Stevenson there, former UFC fighter, MMA fighter, giving back to the community now. Obviously, you heard about Free MMA, the gym that has been set up to help people, low-income families, kids that are troubled, have had issues, personal issues happen to them, and even seniors. As you heard, Joe, he's giving back to everybody within MMA, and, you know, him touching upon his sobriety as well. He was so honest and open about that, and it's so good to hear he's 10 years sober, he's stuck to it, and just everything about the man. His kid's doing so well, one of his kids wrestling, and him living that through his son is amazing to hear. So this has been episode 141 of Stu's Wrestling Podcast, and we will see you very soon for episode 142 of the show. Take care, everybody. God bless.